Welcome to Mr. James Family Returns. I'm Mr. James, and before we get into today's story, I need you to do something for me. I need you to sit down, because what I'm about to tell you is not the kind of story you hear every day. This is the kind of story that stays with you, the kind that makes you think about every choice you've ever made, every person you've ever taken for granted, every door you closed without looking back. Now, picture a charity gala, hundreds of guests, crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, the kind of room where everybody is somebody. And in the middle of all that, a woman in a gray service uniform, on her knees, scrubbing the floor, while a stiletto heel comes down on the back of her hand. She gasps, and the man standing above her freezes, because he knows that sound, he knows that voice, he knows that woman. She is his wife, the one he left behind 14 months ago, the one he was told had taken everything and walked away, the one he believed had moved on without looking back. But she didn't move on. She couldn't, because everything was taken from her, her ID, her passport, her money, her home, while she was pregnant, and 2 floors above that ballroom, right now, at this very moment, is a little boy named Marcus, 1 year old, lying in a hospital bed, with monitors on his chest and his father's eyes, a son who has never once heard his father's name. But here's what nobody in that ballroom knew yet. The woman who did all of this didn't just destroy a marriage. She may have done something far worse, something that goes all the way back to a rainy night outside Pasadena and a car accident that was never really an accident. Stay with me, because this story is called "He Left His Pregnant Wife for a Mistress Abroad." But his return turned into a shocking nightmare, and I promise you, family, by the time we reach the end, you will feel every single word. Let's begin. She still remembered the way he smelled when he left. That morning cologne he always put on too much of. The kind that lingered on the pillowcase for days after. She used to tease him about it. Said he was trying to smell like a magazine ad. He'd laugh and say that was exactly the point. That morning, he didn't laugh. He moved through the bedroom quietly, zipping his suitcase in that careful, deliberate way people move when they're trying not to wake you, or trying not to talk to you. Aaliyah was awake. She'd been awake since 4. She'd been awake most nights that week, if she was being honest. Something had shifted between them, and she couldn't quite name it. Couldn't point to a day or a conversation and say, that's where it changed. It had just changed. The way weather changes. Slowly, then all at once. She was 11 weeks pregnant. She hadn't told him yet that morning was the worst one so far, that she'd thrown up twice before he even came out of the shower, that her back hurt in a way that scared her a little. She didn't say any of that because she didn't want to start the day with weight. She wanted him to leave well. She wanted to hug him at the door and mean it, and have him mean it back. 6 months, he said, standing at the bedroom door with his coat already on. Maybe less if things move fast. London's not going anywhere, she said. She meant it as a small joke. He gave her a small smile. Not the real one. The polite one. She walked him to the door anyway, helped him with the second bag even though she wasn't supposed to be lifting. He didn't notice. He was already on his phone, scrolling something, murmuring responses to messages she couldn't see. At the door, he kissed her forehead. Not her mouth. Her forehead. She stood there after the door closed and just stood there, listening to the elevator, listening to the quiet, putting her hand on her stomach without thinking about it, the way you do when you're protecting something and you don't even realize you're doing it. She told herself she was being paranoid, told herself long distance was hard and he was under pressure, and the London expansion had been stressing him out for months. She'd been reading about it, following his company news the way a good wife does when her husband doesn't always bring work home. She knew what was at stake for him professionally. She understood. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that Chloe was already at the airport. She'd been in their lives for almost 8 months at that point, introduced as a business development consultant. Young, polished, always professional in the office settings where Aaliyah had met her. The kind of woman who shook your hand firmly and looked you in the eye and said all the right things. Aaliyah had no reason to distrust her. She didn't distrust her. She just noticed sometimes the way Ethan's voice changed slightly on certain phone calls. A little quieter, a little more careful. She noticed and she filed it away in that place women keep things they're not ready to look at yet. She was looking at it now. Standing at the window of their Hollywood Hills home, watching the car disappear down the canyon road. She made herself breakfast she didn't really want. Called her mother back in Memphis, who told her pregnancy hormones made everything feel bigger than it was. Her mother wasn't wrong, exactly. But she also wasn't entirely right. The first letter she sent him was 2 weeks after he left. Handwritten, because she knew he kept things like that. She'd always been the kind of person who believed in handwritten letters. There was something about putting ink to paper that felt more honest than a text, more permanent. She wrote about how the baby was doing, about the appointment she'd gone to alone because she hadn't wanted to bother him, about how the heartbeat had made her cry in the exam room and the nurse had handed her a tissue without saying a word, which somehow made her cry harder. She sent it to the London flat he'd given her the address for. He never responded. She told herself he was busy, sent another one 3 weeks later, this one shorter, just checking in, asking him to call when he had time. He didn't call. She tried his number. It rang and rang. Then one day it went straight to voicemail. She left a message, then another. She sent emails that went unanswered for days, then weeks. When he did respond, it was brief, distracted, busy. Talk soon, everything's fine. She started to feel something she didn't have a word for. It wasn't quite fear. It wasn't quite anger. It was something in between. That quiet dread of watching a door slowly close and not being able to reach it in time. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that her letters never reached him. Chloe had arranged it carefully. She'd gotten access to the flat's mail first. She'd monitored his phone when he slept. She'd read every message, intercepted every voicemail, deleted every email before it could be opened. She was meticulous about it. Patient in the way that only deeply calculated people can be patient. The video came later. Aaliyah would learn about it much later, long after it had already done its damage. Someone Chloe had hired, a tech person, had used audio recordings pulled from Aaliyah's old Instagram lives and YouTube comments to construct something that sounded exactly like her voice. The video was grainy, deliberately. The woman's face was never fully visible. But the voice, her voice, or something close enough to it, said clearly that she was done, that she'd met someone else, that she'd taken care of the pregnancy, that Ethan should stop holding on. He watched it in a hotel room in London at 2 a.m. He didn't call. He didn't investigate. He didn't get on a plane. He cried, apparently. Or at least that's what the housekeeper would later tell Aaliyah she'd heard through the door, that he sat in that room for a long time. And then he went quiet. And that was that. Aaliyah, in the meantime, was 4 months pregnant, alone in a house that suddenly felt too big, still writing letters to a man who would never read them, still waiting for a phone call that wasn't coming, still telling herself there had to be an explanation. That love didn't just evaporate, that the man she married was still in there somewhere, and this was just a rough patch. A miscommunication. Something fixable. She would spend the next few months learning, slowly and painfully, that some things aren't miscommunications. Some things are choices. There's a particular kind of silence that follows when someone stops choosing you. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just settles in, like dust, and for a while you keep cleaning it up, thinking it'll stop coming. Aaliyah kept cleaning, kept reaching, the way most good women do, long past the point where they probably should. The house looked the same from the outside. Same iron gate, Same stone driveway that curved up toward the entrance like it was trying to impress you before you even got to the door. Same jacaranda tree on the left side that dropped purple flowers every spring, whether anyone noticed or not. From the outside, nothing had changed. But Ethan noticed it the moment he walked in. He couldn't explain it at first. He just stood in the entryway with his bag still in his hand and felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Not relief, not comfort. Something closer to wrongness. The kind you feel in a place that looks familiar but isn't quite right. Like a word you've said so many times it stops sounding like a word. He set his bags down slowly. Chloe walked past him into the living room, already on her phone, already talking to someone about something that needed to be handled. She moved through the space easily, comfortably, like she'd always lived there. And he watched her for a moment. This woman he had married in a small ceremony in the French countryside with no family present and no real celebration, and he tried to locate the feeling he was supposed to have. The one that said, home. It wasn't there. He walked through the main hall, and that's when he saw it. The photos were gone. Not all of them. That would have been too obvious, but the ones that mattered, the ones on the long wall leading from the entryway to the living room, had been replaced. Quietly, deliberately replaced. Where there had once been a framed picture of him and Aaliyah at the overlook above Malibu, her head thrown back laughing at something he'd said, there was now a large canvas portrait of Chloe in a white dress, looking off to the side in that way people pose when they want to look like they're not posing. Where there had been a smaller photo from their second anniversary, the one they'd taken themselves on a timer in their kitchen with food on the stove behind them, there was a sleek abstract print in gray and black. He stood in front of that wall for a long moment. "I had it redecorated while you were still finishing things up in Paris," Chloe said from the living room, not looking up from her phone. Felt like a fresh start made sense. He didn't say anything. He walked to the kitchen. The housekeeper, a quiet woman named Rosa who had worked for him for nearly 6 years, was standing at the counter folding dish towels. She looked up when he came in, and her face did something complicated. Not quite a smile. Something more careful than that. "Welcome home, Mr. Ethan," she said. "Rosa." He nodded, opened the refrigerator out of habit, closed it again. "How have things been?" "Fine," she said, the same careful tone. He leaned against the counter, lowered his voice slightly. "Did Aaliyah come back for her things? After everything?" Rosa's hands went still on the dish towel. "Mr. Ethan, Chloe told me she cleared out the accounts and left with someone. I just want to know if she came herself or if she sent someone." Rosa looked at him for a moment, something moving behind her eyes that she was clearly deciding whether or not to let out. Then she looked down at the towel in her hands and said quietly, "She didn't come, sir. Nobody came for her things. I packed some of them myself when Miss Chloe asked me to put them in storage." He was quiet. "All of it?" "Most of it," Rosa said. "Her books. Some clothes. A few boxes from the bedroom closet." A pause. "The baby things, too. The ones she'd started buying." He didn't respond to that. He straightened up, nodded once, and walked out of the kitchen. He told himself he didn't want to think about the baby things. He'd spent months trying not to think about them, about any of it. He'd done what men do when they don't know how to hold grief. He'd buried it under work and forward motion and the convenient story that she had left him first, that she had made her choice, that he was the one who had been abandoned. It was easier that way. It was a lie, but it was an easier one than the alternative, which was sitting with the possibility that something had gone wrong, and he hadn't stayed long enough to find out what. Chloe appeared in the doorway of the bedroom that evening, glass of wine in her hand, watching him unpack. "You're quiet," she said. "Tired," he said. "It's jet lag." She came and sat on the edge of the bed. "Give it a few days, you'll feel like yourself again." He nodded, kept unpacking. He found, near the bottom of his bag, a small photograph he'd kept folded in the inside pocket of a jacket. He didn't even remember putting it there. It was from before the London trip. Before everything. Aaliyah in the backyard of the house, sitting cross-legged in the grass with a book in her lap, not knowing he was watching her. He'd taken it on his phone one afternoon and printed it on a whim. He looked at it for a second. Then he folded it back up and put it in the drawer of the nightstand on his side of the bed, under a few other things where it wouldn't be easily seen. Chloe was watching him. "What was that?" she asked, casual, light. "Nothing," he said. "Old receipt." She smiled and sipped her wine and didn't push it. But she'd seen. She always saw. The weeks that followed had a rhythm to them that looked like normal life from the outside. Meetings, dinners, social events where Chloe wore the right things and said the right things and made sure to stand close enough to Ethan to signal ownership without being obvious about it. She was good at that. She was good at most things that required performance. Ethan went through the motions. He threw himself back into work the way he always did when he didn't want to feel something. Back-to-back calls, 2 new acquisition deals he probably didn't need to be personally involved in, but inserted himself into anyway. Late nights at the office that Chloe pretended to understand. There were moments in the quiet when things surfaced. He'd be in the middle of a meeting and something small would hit him. A phrase someone used, a gesture, a particular kind of afternoon light coming through a window, and he'd feel it. That thing with no name. Not quite guilt. Something older than guilt. Something that sat lower in the chest. He asked his assistant once, casually, framed as something routine, to run a basic location search on Aaliyah. Public records. Nothing invasive. Just to know she was okay. The results came back incomplete. No current address. No recent employment records. No social media activity in over a year. Getting used to something and making peace with it, those are 2 different things. Ethan had gotten used to a lot. But peace? That's harder to fake. And somewhere in the part of himself he'd stopped listening to, he knew it. The gala had been Chloe's idea. Not the charity itself, that had been in planning for months, organized through Ethan's foundation. A fundraiser for the pediatric wing of Cedars-Sinai. One of those events that exist somewhere between genuine goodwill and public image management, the way most things do at that level of wealth. But the scale of it, the guest list, the venue choice, the media presence, all of that had been Chloe's doing. She had taken the foundation's modest planning document and turned it into something that would be covered in 3 different lifestyle magazines. She was good at scale, good at visibility, good at making sure that wherever Ethan stood, the lighting was right. The venue was a grand ballroom connected to the hospital's newer wing. High ceilings, tall windows draped in ivory, round tables with low floral arrangements so people could see each other across the room. Which was important because half the point of these events was being seen by the right people. The pediatric floor was just 2 elevators up. That detail, the proximity to the children the event was meant to help, would stay with Ethan later. Would take on a weight he hadn't anticipated when he'd walked in that evening, feeling nothing more complicated than mild social fatigue. He'd been tired going in. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. Chloe had spent an hour getting ready and looked exactly like someone who had spent an hour getting ready. Ivory gown, hair pinned up in that deliberately effortless way. She checked his tie at the door of the car and smoothed his lapel and told him to smile more naturally, which was the kind of thing she said sometimes that landed wrong even when she probably didn't mean it to. He smiled. Naturally. The room filled quickly. These crowds always moved the same way. Clusters forming and dissolving, conversations that were really auditions, laughter that was a little too ready. Ethan knew how to work a room. He'd been doing it since his mid-20s. He shook hands and made eye contact and said the kinds of things people expected him to say, and it cost him almost nothing because he'd long since learned to do it on autopilot. Chloe stayed close for the first hour. Then she found her orbit, a cluster of women near the far end of the room. Someone's wife, someone's business partner, a minor television personality. And she settled in there, comfortable and sparkling. Ethan drifted. He ended up near the bar, not drinking heavily, just holding a glass of red wine and listening to a conversation he was only half part of. A developer he vaguely knew was talking about a project in Austin. Ethan nodded in the right places. Watched the room. It was a large staff for an event this size. Servers moving quietly between guests, trays held level, eyes forward. The kind of invisible professionalism that only registers when something goes wrong. He shifted his weight and turned slightly, and that was all it took. The wine glass tilted. Just enough. A clean dark stain spread across the front of his white dress shirt and the edge of his tuxedo jacket. Immediate and irreversible. He said something low under his breath. Not loud. Just the quiet frustration of a man who knows the evening just got more complicated. Chloe appeared at his side within seconds. She had a talent for appearing. "Go get someone to deal with this," she said, not to him, but to the air around her, to anyone within earshot who was staff. Her voice had that particular quality it got in public when things weren't going her way. Still controlled, still surface level, pleasant. But underneath it, an edge. "I'll just go change," Ethan said. "You don't have anything to change into. Just have them blot it before it sets." She was already scanning the room. "Where is... Someone needs to come handle this." A server nearby relayed the request. Within a minute, a woman in a gray service uniform came from somewhere near the side corridor, moving quickly, head down, carrying a small kit, the kind of basic stain kit that hotels and event venues keep for exactly this kind of emergency. She knelt down near him without looking up, opened the kit, started working on the jacket hem first, careful, methodical, trying to lift the stain before it dried completely. She didn't speak. Most of the service staff didn't at events like this. It was an unwritten rule of that world. You become functional, not present. You do the task and you disappear. Ethan looked down at the top of her head briefly and then looked away. Back at the room, giving her space to work the way you do when someone is doing something close and you're trying not to make it more uncomfortable than it already is. Chloe was not looking away. She was watching the woman work with that particular expression she got sometimes. Not quite contempt, but close enough to it that the difference didn't much matter. She said something to the woman near the stain on the shirt. Something about being more careful. About not making it worse. The woman didn't respond. Just kept working. "Did you hear me?" Chloe said, still quiet, still surface level even, but pointed. The woman shifted slightly, moved to a different part of the stain. Chloe's heel moved. It might have been an accident. That's the thing about moments like that. They're designed to look like accidents. A small shift of weight, a step in the wrong direction. The stiletto came down on the back of the woman's hand, right across the knuckles. Not a full stomp, just enough pressure, held just a half second too long to make clear it wasn't nothing. The woman gasped. It was a small sound, involuntary, the kind of sound a body makes before the mind has a chance to decide whether or not to make it. And that sound, that particular sound, moved through Ethan like something electric. He didn't know why at first, couldn't have explained it in that first half second. It was just a sound. A woman in pain making a small sound in a crowded room. It shouldn't have stopped him the way it did. But it did. He looked down. The woman had pulled her hand back and was pressing it against her chest, still not looking up, still trying to stay invisible, still trying to do the job she was there to do. Her shoulders had gone tight. Her whole body had gone tight in that particular way bodies go when they're absorbing something and trying very hard not to show it. Ethan crouched down. "Hey," he said, quietly, Are you all right? She turned slightly away, shook her head just barely. A gesture that could have meant I'm fine or could have meant please don't. Look up, he said. He didn't mean it as a command. It came out softer than that. More like a question without a question mark. She didn't move for a moment. And then slowly, the way someone moves when they've been trying very hard to stay invisible and they've just run out of the energy to keep doing it, she lifted her head. The world did something strange in that moment. Not dramatic. Not the way movies make it look, with the music swelling and everything going slow. It was quieter than that. More like the floor had shifted slightly under him. Like something had moved that couldn't be unmoved. It was Aliyah. Not the Aliyah he remembered. Not quite. The woman looking up at him from the floor of this ballroom was thinner than she'd been. The kind of thin that isn't a choice. Her face had a tiredness in it that had settled deep, past the surface. The kind that takes a long time to get to and longer to leave. Her eyes were the same shape, the same darkness. But something in them had gone quiet in a way they hadn't been before. She looked at him. He couldn't speak. For a moment, neither of them did anything. The room kept moving around them. Conversations, laughter, the soft sound of a string quartet somewhere near the far wall, and the two of them were just still in the middle of it. Two people trying to process something that didn't fit into the evening they'd both thought they were having. Aliyah. He said her name like he wasn't sure it was allowed. She looked at him for one more second. Then she started to stand, reached for her kit, trying to close this moment down, fold it up, get out of this room and back to wherever she'd come from. He touched her arm, not grabbing, just enough to stop her. "Wait," he said. "Wait. What? How are you?" He stopped, started again. "What are you doing here?" She looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. Her expression wasn't anger exactly. It wasn't hurt exactly. It was something flatter than either of those things, something that had been through anger and hurt and come out the other side into something quieter and harder to read. "I work here," she said. Her voice was the same. That was the thing that got him. Everything else had changed, the weight, the eyes, the set of her jaw, but her voice was exactly the same. And hearing it now, in this room, after all this time, did something to him he wasn't prepared for. "You work here," he repeated, like he was trying to understand a sentence in a language he used to know. "Event staff," she said, "through an agency." Chloe had gone very still beside him. Aliyah glanced at her once, a brief, controlled glance, and then she looked back at the floor and picked up her kit and said, quietly, "I need to get back." Aliyah, Ethan, just his name, said the way you say something when you need someone to stop. He let go of her arm. She walked away, back toward the side corridor she'd come from, and he watched her go and felt something shifting in his chest that he didn't have a word for. Not guilt. Not yet. Something that came before guilt. That early, uncomfortable stage where you realize you've been wrong about something, but you don't yet know how wrong. Chloe put her hand on his arm. "She's fine," she said. "Clearly she's managing." He didn't say anything. "Come on, the mayor just arrived." He let himself be steered, let the evening continue around him. Smiled when he was supposed to, Shaps answered questions, stood in the right spots for photos. But he kept looking at the side corridor, and he couldn't stop hearing that sound, that small, involuntary gasp, the one that had come out of Aliyah before she could decide whether to make it, the one that had stopped him like nothing else in that whole, long evening had. Sometimes the thing that breaks through isn't the big dramatic moment. It's something small, a sound, a familiar voice saying one word, and once you hear it, really hear it, you can't go back to pretending you didn't. He found her in the corridor. It took him 20 minutes to get away from the room without making it obvious. 20 minutes of nodding and excusing himself and redirecting conversations, and finally slipping out through a side door while Chloe was occupied with a group near the dessert table. He didn't tell her where he was going. He didn't think about what he was going to say. He just walked. The corridor outside the ballroom was quieter, longer than he remembered it looking from inside. Service doors on both sides, fluorescent lighting that felt harsh after the warm glow of the event space. A few staff members moved through with equipment carts, barely glancing at him. He walked slowly, looking. He found her near the end of the hall, sitting on a low bench outside what looked like a supply room. Her kit was on the floor beside her. She had her injured hand resting in her lap, and she was looking at it. Not doing anything with it, just looking at it the way you look at something when you're trying to decide how bad it actually is. She looked up when she heard him coming. Her expression didn't change much, just a slight tightening, the look of someone who had hoped for more time. "You don't have to," she started. "I just want to talk," he said. 5 minutes, that's all." She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back down at her hand. "My break's almost over." He sat down on the bench anyway. Not close, a reasonable distance. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor between his feet and tried to find a starting place. There wasn't a good one. There rarely is in moments like this. "How long have you been back in LA?" he asked. "I never really left," she said. He looked at her. "I had nowhere to go, Ethan." She said it plainly. Not for effect. Just stating a fact the way you state facts when you've had a long time to make peace with them. "My name was flagged on the joint accounts. My ID was gone. I couldn't get into the house. I couldn't get on a plane. I had nothing." The words landed slowly. He heard them, but the full weight of them took a moment to reach him, the way very cold water takes a second to register as pain. "What do you mean your ID was gone?" She turned her head and looked at him then. Really looked at him. And there was something in her face in that moment, not cruelty, not satisfaction, just a kind of tired clarity that made him feel very small. "Someone broke into the house," she said. "The night after you left. I woke up and the safe was open. My passport, my ID, my social security card, the emergency credit card that was in my name. All of it." She paused. "And before you ask, the security footage from that night was deleted. Whoever did it knew the system." He was very still. "I filed a report," she continued. "The police took the report and nothing happened. I called your office and they told me you'd given instructions not to be disturbed for personal matters. I called your cell and it went to voicemail every time." She stopped. "I was 4 months pregnant and I was alone in a house I couldn't prove I lived in because every document that had my name on it was gone." He opened his mouth. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't say you didn't know. I understand that you didn't know. I'm not saying this to punish you. I'm saying it because you asked." He closed his mouth. She shifted on the bench, adjusted her hand in her lap. He noticed the redness across her knuckles where Chloe's heel had come down, and he felt something move through him that was close to nausea. "Where did you go?" he asked. His voice came out lower than he intended. "A shelter first," she said. "In Inglewood. They were good to me there. Helped me get a temporary ID replacement started. It took months because without the originals, everything takes months." She said it without drama, just the facts of it. "I was 6 months pregnant by the time I had enough documentation to start working again. By then I'd lost the apartment I'd tried to rent because I couldn't pass the background check without proper ID." He was quiet for a long time. "The baby," he finally said. Something moved across her face. Brief, controlled, there and gone. "He's here," she said. The word landed in his chest like something physical. He's upstairs," Aaliyah said. She said it carefully, The way you say something you've been carrying alone for so long that saying it out loud to another person still feels strange. He's been here for 3 weeks. He was born with a heart condition. They've known about it since he was in utero, but I didn't have the insurance or the money to address it properly before it became critical. She stopped, drew a slow breath. He had surgery 8 days ago. He's stable now, but he's still up there. Ethan had stopped breathing normally somewhere in the middle of that. He couldn't finish the sentence. His name is Marcus, she said. He's 1 year old. A pause. He has your eyes? The corridor was very quiet. Somewhere down the hall a cart rolled past. The fluorescent light above them buzzed faintly, the way they do. Ethan put his face in his hands. He stayed like that for a moment. Not crying. Just somewhere else. Somewhere inside the last 14 months trying to locate the place where he could have done something different and finding too many of them. Aaliyah watched him. She didn't reach for him. She didn't soften, but she didn't look away either. I need to get back to work, she said gently. I took this shift because the agency pays more for event placements and I needed the money. Aaliyah. I'm not finished. She said it quietly, but it stopped him. There's something else you need to know. And I need you to hear it clearly because I'm only going to say it once, and I need you to believe me. He looked at her. She reached into the front pocket of her uniform and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It had been folded and unfolded enough times that the creases were soft, almost worn through at the corners. She held it out to him. He took it. He unfolded it slowly. It was a report. A private investigator's report dated 8 months ago. Several pages, dense with information, but the summary at the top was clear enough. He read it once. Then he read it again. His eyes moved slowly down the page. The report detailed a pattern of activity traced back to Chloe. Not just the interception of correspondence, not just the AI-generated audio used to construct the fake video. There were financial transactions, shell accounts, payments made to a tech contractor in Eastern Europe for audio synthesis work, payments to someone local, a name he didn't recognize, for what the report described as access facilitation, which was, the investigator had noted plainly, consistent with the kind of access needed to disable a home security system and remove documents from a personal safe. He kept reading. Near the bottom of the second page, his eyes stopped. He read that section 3 times. The investigator had followed the money carefully, traced it back further than just the past year, had found a pattern that connected Chloe to a series of decisions made in the 18 months before Ethan's father had died. His father, who had died in what had been ruled an accident. A car accident on a rain-slicked road outside Pasadena 2 years ago. His father, whose death had accelerated the transfer of a significant inheritance and consolidated Ethan's control of the company in a way that had ultimately benefited, the investigator's word, several parties who were close to Ethan at the time. The report didn't say murder. It didn't have to. What it said was that there were financial connections between Chloe and a person who had serviced the vehicle his father had been driving, that the service record had been altered, that Chloe had known about the inheritance structure in detail before his father died, that she had been, in the investigator's careful language, unusually positioned to benefit from the timing of events. Ethan's hands were not steady when he finished reading. He looked up at Aaliyah. "How did you get this?" he asked. His voice was different now. Something had gone out of it. "I saved for 8 months," she said. "Every extra shift, every event placement. I knew I needed something real, something that couldn't be dismissed." She looked at him steadily. "I wasn't going to just show up and tell you a story. I knew you wouldn't believe a story." He looked back down at the paper. "My father," he said. "I'm sorry," she said. And she meant it. It was clear she meant it. Whatever she felt about Ethan, whatever the last year had done to her feelings about him, she was not glad about this part. He folded the paper carefully. He held it in both hands and looked at it. "I need to make a call," he said. "I know." He stood up. He was steadier than he looked. That thing that happens to people sometimes when the worst has already happened and the shock moves through, and what's left is just the clear, cold need to act. He looked at her. "Marcus, the doctors say he'll be okay?" "They think so," she said. "He's strong." A pause. "Stubborn too. Don't know where he gets that." It wasn't quite a joke, but it was close enough to one that it did something to the air between them. Not warmth exactly, just a brief acknowledgement that they were both still human, that under all of this there were still two people who had once known each other. He nodded. "I'm going back inside," she said. She picked up her kit, stood, smoothed the front of her uniform with her uninjured hand. "My break ended 4 minutes ago." "Aaliyah." He said her name again. He said it the way he had the first time, in the ballroom, like he was still learning whether it was allowed. She stopped, but didn't turn around. "I don't have the right words," he said. "I know that. I'm not going to try to, He stopped. Started again. "I'm sorry. For what that's worth." She stood there for a moment with her back to him. "It doesn't worth much right now," she said. "Honest. Not cruel. Just honest. But I heard you." And then she walked back down the corridor, back toward the service entrance, back to the job she'd taken to pay for the hospital room 2 floors above them, where their son was sleeping with monitors on his chest. Ethan stood in the empty corridor with a folded piece of paper in his hand, and the particular stillness of a man who has just watched his entire understanding of the last 2 years come apart at the seams. He looked down at the report one more time. Then he took out his phone, and he made the call. There's a difference between not knowing and not wanting to know. Ethan had told himself for a long time that he hadn't known. Standing in that corridor, holding that paper, he had to finally be honest with himself about which one it had really been. The call took 11 minutes. Ethan stood in that corridor the whole time, back against the wall, voice low, the folded report in his hand. He'd called his attorney first, not because that was the emotional response, but because it was the right one, the one his father had taught him. When something is serious, you get the right people moving before you do anything else. His father had said that more times than he could count. His father. He pushed that thought aside for now, filed it in the place where you put things that are too large to hold while you're still in the middle of something else. He would get to it. He would have to get to it. But not yet. His attorney listened without interrupting. Asked 3 questions. Said he would make 2 calls and have someone at the venue within the hour. Said Ethan should not confront anyone directly before then. Said it clearly, the way attorneys say things when they know their client is emotional and needs the instruction to be simple. Ethan said he understood. He hung up and stood there for another moment. The corridor was still quiet. A staff member passed without looking at him. The fluorescent light above him was still buzzing. He straightened up, folded the report one more time and put it in his inside jacket pocket, next to where his heart was doing something irregular and fast. Then he walked back toward the ballroom. Chloe was exactly where he expected her to be. Near the center of the room now, glass of champagne in hand, talking to a couple he recognized vaguely from some industry event months ago. She was laughing at something. That particular laugh she had in public. Bright, a little musical, designed to carry just far enough to be heard without seeming like it was meant to be heard. She was good at that laugh. She saw him come in. Her eyes found him immediately the way they always did in rooms, that tracking quality she had, always aware of where he was. She smiled at him across the space, a smooth, easy smile. He crossed the room toward her. Something in his face must have been different because the smile shifted slightly as he got closer, adjusted itself. That micro recalibration she did when she was reading a situation and updating her approach. "There you are," she said. "Warm. Light. I was starting to think you'd gotten lost." "We need to talk," he said. The couple beside her took the social cue and drifted politely away. Chloe kept her expression easy, kept the champagne glass steady in her hand. "You're scaring me," she said, a small laugh under it. "Testing. I need you to tell me about the security system," he said, quietly, evenly. "The night I left for London." Something moved behind her eyes, gone in a fraction of a second. If he hadn't been looking for it, he wouldn't have seen it. "What about it?" she said. "Someone disabled it that night. Went into the safe. Took Aaliyah's documents." He watched her face. "You managed the house systems while I was traveling. You were the only one besides me who had the full access codes. Ethan." She said his name in that particular tone, the one that was designed to make him feel like he was being irrational, like he was a reasonable man on the edge of doing something unreasonable, and she was the steady one, the calm one, the one he should listen to. "I don't know what she told you, but she didn't tell me about the security system," he said. "A private investigator did." The champagne glass didn't move. Her face didn't move. But something underneath all of it shifted. He could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Everything on the surface, still. Everything underneath, adjusting. "You had someone investigated," she said. "She did," he said. "She saved for 8 months on an event staff salary to pay for it." A long pause. Chloe looked at him, and for just a moment, just a fraction of a moment, something real moved across her face. Not remorse, not guilt exactly. Something colder than either of those things, a kind of assessment. The look of someone running calculations. Then it was gone and the smooth surface was back. "Whatever that report says, it's not what it looks like," she said. "There are things about my past that are complicated and that I should have told you about, I know that. But there's context you don't have, and if you'll just—" "My father," Ethan said. She stopped. The word sat there between them. "The report goes back further than London," he said, "further than Aaliyah." He kept his voice level. "It cost him something to do that. It goes back to before my father died." The room continued around them. Glasses clinking. Conversation moving. The string quartet somewhere behind them playing something soft and unhurried. All of it continuing. Indifferent, the way the world continues while private devastations happen inside it. Chloe set her champagne glass down on a passing server's tray. "I want to speak to a lawyer," she said. "That's a good idea," Ethan said. What happened next moved faster than the preceding months of stillness. His attorney arrived at 20 minutes past 9 with 2 associates and a quiet, efficient manner that came from years of handling situations that required discretion in public settings. They found a private room off the main corridor, a small meeting space used by hospital administration, and Ethan met them there briefly, handing over the report, providing the summary of what Aaliyah had told him. Answering questions in the flat, careful way people answer questions when they're holding themselves very tightly together. The attorneys made calls. At 9:47, 2 plainclothes officers arrived. There had apparently already been an open inquiry, something Ethan hadn't known about, something that had been moving slowly for over a year in the background. The PI's report, his attorney explained, contained information that aligned with evidence the investigators had already been gathering. It was the kind of alignment that moves things from open inquiry to something more immediate. Ethan went back into the ballroom. He found Chloe near the entrance, coat already in her hand, the particular body language of someone who has decided that leaving is the best available option. One of her friends was beside her, confused, asking questions Chloe was deflecting with quick, light answers. She saw Ethan, and then she saw the men behind him, and her face did something it had never done in all the time he'd known her. It went very still in a way that wasn't controlled, the kind of still that happens when the performance runs out. One of the officers spoke to her quietly, professionally, the way it's done when the setting requires a certain discretion. She looked at Ethan once, a long look. He couldn't fully read it. There was anger in it, maybe. Or something that had lived next to anger for so long it had started to look like it. And underneath that, something else. Something he didn't have a name for and didn't spend much time trying to find one. She didn't say anything to him. She left with them quietly. That was the thing that stayed with him afterward, how quietly she went. No scene, no outburst. Just that one long look, and then she was gone. Through a side exit, away from the room full of people who were only just beginning to notice something had shifted in the atmosphere. The room murmured. That wave that moves through a crowd when something has happened but no one quite knows what. Heads turning. Conversations pausing. Eyes moving toward Ethan. He stood at the edge of the ballroom and felt every one of those eyes and felt nothing about them at all. He found the elevator. He didn't ask anyone for directions. He just walked to the bank of elevators near the main corridor and pressed the button for the pediatric floor. Stood in the elevator alone while it moved. Watched the numbers change. The pediatric wing had a different quality than the rest of the building. Quieter in a way that wasn't peaceful exactly, but careful. The lighting was softer up here. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and something else underneath it, something that was harder to name. The particular atmosphere of a floor where serious things were happening to small people, and everyone was working very hard to make it feel as safe as possible. A nurse at the station looked up when he came off the elevator. "I'm looking for..." He stopped. Realized he didn't have a room number. Realized he didn't even know what last name she'd registered under. A patient. An infant. His mother's name is Aliyah. The nurse looked at him for a moment. "Are you family?" she asked. He opened his mouth. Closed it. "I'm his father," he said. It was the first time he'd said it out loud, to anyone, including himself. And it was a strange thing, how those 3 words felt both completely foreign and completely true at the same time. The nurse held his gaze for a moment, then she checked something on her screen and said, "Room 412. Down the hall. Turn left." He walked the hall slowly. Turned left. Room 412 had a small window beside the door. He stopped outside it and looked through before he went in. Aliyah was in the chair beside the bed. She'd changed out of the service uniform. She must have had clothes in a bag somewhere, some small preparation for after her shift. She was in a plain gray sweatshirt and she had her legs pulled up under her in the chair the way people sit when they've been sitting in the same place for a very long time and have given up on comfortable posture. She was looking at the bed. In the bed, in the particular nest of hospital linens and soft monitoring equipment that pediatric units construct around their smallest patients, was Marcus. Ethan looked at him through the window. He was small. Smaller than Ethan had imagined, though he didn't know why he'd imagined anything specific. He was on his back with his arms loosely out at his sides the way infants sleep, like they've decided to take up as much space as they're given. He had a small monitor lead taped to his chest. His breathing was steady. Even. He had Ethan's nose. And the eyes? Closed in sleep. But Aliyah had said it, and now he could see from the shape of them that she wasn't wrong. Ethan stood at that window for a long time. He didn't try to stop what was happening in his chest, didn't try to manage it or file it away for later. He just stood there and let it happen. The grief of a year he hadn't been present for, the weight of a face he was seeing for the first time. The specific, terrible clarity of understanding fully and finally what had been taken. Not just from him, from them, from this small person in that bed who had spent his first year of life in circumstances that should never have been his. Behind him, down the hall, the sounds of the hospital continued. He put his hand flat against the glass. Just for a moment. Just that. Then he pushed the door open gently and went inside. Aaliyah looked up when he came in. She didn't look surprised. Maybe she'd seen him through the window? Maybe she'd just expected it, in the way you expect certain things once the night has already moved in a particular direction. She didn't say anything. He came and stood at the foot of the bed and looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then he looked at Aaliyah. "He's beautiful," he said. She looked at their son. Something moved across her face that was private, the kind of expression that belongs to a person alone with something they love and have fought hard to protect. "He is," she said. The room was quiet except for the soft, steady sound of the monitor. Outside the window, the city was doing what it always did, moving, lit up, indifferent to the particular weight of this particular room. Ethan pulled a chair up and sat down. Not close, just present. He didn't try to fill the silence with anything. For once, he had the good sense not to. They sat like that for a while. Two people in a hospital room with a sleeping child between them and a year's worth of wreckage behind them and no clean way forward and no words that could carry all of it. Just the two of them and Marcus and the quiet. And in a strange way, in a way that would take Ethan a long time to understand, that quiet was the most honest thing that had happened all evening. Some things can't be fixed. They can only be faced. Ethan was only just beginning to learn the difference. And Aaliyah had already learned it the hard way, alone, in rooms a lot smaller and colder than this one. Morning came slowly in room 412. The kind of morning that doesn't announce itself. No dramatic shift in light. Just a gradual softening of the darkness outside the window until the city skyline became visible again, gray and quiet, doing what it always does without asking anyone's permission. Aaliyah had fallen asleep in the chair sometime after midnight. She didn't mean to. She never meant to. She always told herself she'd just rest her eyes for a few minutes, and then she'd wake up stiff-necked and disoriented with the room a few degrees colder and the monitor still beeping its steady rhythm and Marcus still breathing, still there, still holding on in that stubborn way he had. She woke up and Ethan was still in the room. She hadn't expected that. He was in the chair on the other side of the bed, not asleep, just sitting. He had his jacket off, folded over the arm of the chair, his tie loosened, his elbows on his knees. He was looking at Marcus the way he'd been looking at him for hours. That particular stillness of a person who has run out of things to think and has just settled into looking. He noticed her wake up, glanced over. She straightened in her chair, rolled her neck slowly, looked at Marcus first, the way she always did when she came back to consciousness in this room, a quick inventory, a breath held until she confirmed he was okay, then released. He was okay. She exhaled. "You stayed," she said, not accusatory, just noting it. "Yeah," he said. She nodded slowly, looked at the window, the skyline. "Chloe?" she asked. "They took her last night," he said. "My attorney says there's enough. Between the report and what the investigators already had." He paused. "It's going to take time. These things take time. But it's moving." She nodded again. "Your father," she said carefully. He was quiet for a moment. "I don't know yet," he said. "They're looking at it. That part." He stopped, started again. "That part is going to take longer to understand." She didn't push it. She understood the particular way grief works when it comes in layers. When you think you've already grieved something and then you find out you were grieving the wrong version of it and you have to start over with the real one. She'd done that herself, this past year, more than once. Marcus woke up just after 7. He didn't cry right away the way some babies do. He just opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling for a moment, apparently finding it acceptable, and then turned his head and found Aaliyah, and his face did what it always did when he found her. That particular infant expression that isn't quite a smile yet but is unmistakably something. Recognition. Comfort. The specific ease of knowing you are where you are supposed to be. She was out of the chair and beside him immediately, talking to him in that low, soft way she had with him that she didn't use with anyone else, running her finger along his palm and watching him close his small hand around it. Ethan watched from his chair. He didn't move closer, didn't try to insert himself. He just watched the two of them and sat with what that felt like, which was not simple and was not comfortable and was not something he could have prepared for. After a moment, Marcus turned his head in that wandering, curious way infants do, and his gaze moved across the room and landed, briefly, on Ethan. Ethan went very still. The baby looked at him with the blank, serious attention that babies give to things they haven't categorized yet. Not afraid, not reaching, just looking. Taking him in the way infants take everything in, completely, without judgment, without history. Ethan looked back. He didn't trust himself to speak. So, he didn't. After a moment, Marcus looked away, back toward his mother, back toward the known and the familiar, and Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The doctor came by at 8:30. Young, efficient, carrying a tablet and speaking in the measured way doctors speak when the news is cautiously good. Marcus was responding well. The repair was holding. Another week in observation, probably, and then they could begin discussing what the next few months of monitoring would look like. The condition was manageable. It would require attention and follow-up care and some adjustments, but it was manageable. Aaliyah listened carefully, asked 2 questions. Specific, informed questions that made clear she had been paying attention to every piece of information she'd been given over the past 3 weeks and had done her own research on top of it. The doctor answered her and left. Ethan had been standing near the window during the consultation. He turned back to the room after the doctor was gone. "Whatever the follow-up care costs," he said. "All of it. I'll set up an account today. You won't have to." "Ethan." She said his name in that way again. The stop signal. He stopped. "I'm not saying no," she said. "He's your son, and he deserves whatever he needs. I'm not going to let pride get in the way of that." She looked at him steadily. "But I need you to understand something. That's for him, not for us. There is no arrangement between us that fixes what happened. There's just what's best for him. That's the only thing I'm interested in right now." He nodded. "Okay," he said. "You can see him," she continued. "I'm not going to keep him from you. That's not who I am, and it wouldn't be right." A pause. "But it's going to be slow. On my terms, on his schedule. You don't get to rush this because you feel guilty." "I know," he said. "Do you?" she asked, not aggressive. Genuinely asking. He thought about it, actually thought about it instead of just answering. "I'm learning to," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at Marcus. She asked him to leave mid-morning. Not harshly. Just directly. She had things to do. Phone calls to make. She needed to speak to the social worker who had been helping her navigate the insurance situation. She needed to eat something real because she hadn't eaten a real meal since the previous afternoon. She needed some time in this room without the weight of his presence in it. He understood. He picked up his jacket from the chair, stood at the foot of the bed for a moment, and looked at Marcus one more time. The baby was drowsy again, doing that slow blink that comes before sleep. The world getting heavier. Ethan watched him until his eyes closed. Then he turned to go. He was at the door when Aaliyah spoke. "Ethan." He turned. She was looking at him from her chair. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked tired, genuinely, deeply tired in the way that a night of hospital chair sleep doesn't fix and that probably hadn't been fixed in a long time. But there was something in her face that was also steady, grounded in a way that was different from the hollow exhaustion he'd seen in the ballroom the night before. Like the telling of it had settled something. Like getting it out of her body and into the open air had shifted a weight she'd been carrying. "You didn't just lose a wife, Ethan," she said. She said it quietly, without performance. The way you say something that is simply, plainly true. You lost a son who will never know your name the way he should have, who will grow up knowing you came later, who will have questions someday that neither of us will have good answers to. She held his gaze. I hope you understand what that actually means. Not as something to feel bad about, as something to reckon with, for the rest of your life. He stood in the doorway. He didn't argue, didn't try to promise anything, didn't reach for the words that would make it better because he was beginning to understand that there weren't any. I understand, he said. She nodded once, looked back at Marcus, and that was it. He walked out. The hospital corridor was busy now with the business of the morning. Nurses moving between rooms, a cart rolling past, a family waiting near the elevator with the particular stillness of people who have been waiting for a long time and have learned how to do it. Ethan walked through it and took the elevator down and came out into the hospital lobby and then out through the main entrance into the morning air. He stood on the sidewalk outside. The city was fully awake now. Traffic moving. People walking past with coffee and phones and the ordinary momentum of a regular morning. The sun was doing what it does this time of year in Los Angeles. Already warm, already bright, indifferent to everything. He stood there for a moment. His phone had 17 notifications. Missed calls from board members, from his PR team, from 2 different journalists who had apparently already gotten wind of something happening at last night's event. His attorney had texted 3 times, his assistant twice. The whole machine of his life was already turning toward this, already preparing to manage it, frame it, control the story. He put the phone back in his pocket. He thought about his father, about a rain-slicked road outside Pasadena, about phone calls he hadn't made and questions he hadn't asked and the comfortable way he'd accepted the version of events that required the least of him. He thought about Aaliyah standing at their front door watching his car disappear, about letters she'd written by hand that never arrived, about a shelter in Inglewood and a temporary ID and 8 months of extra shifts saved into a private investigator's fee. He thought about a small hand closing around a finger. He thought about the look on Marcus's face when he'd found his mother across the room. That complete, uncomplicated ease. The specific trust of someone who has only one person in the world who has never once let them down. He stood on that sidewalk and he understood, maybe for the first time, the full shape of what he had built and what he had failed to build, and what the difference between those 2 things had cost. He was rich in every way that other people could see, and he was standing alone on a sidewalk outside a hospital where his son didn't know his name. The morning kept moving. He didn't. Not for a long time. She didn't walk away to win anything. There was nothing left to win. She walked back to her son because that's where she was needed, and that's who she was. A woman who went where she was needed and did what had to be done, and didn't wait for anyone's permission to keep going. That part of her, nobody had managed to take. Not the year she'd lost, not the document stolen from a safe, not a stiletto on the back of her hand in a room full of people who didn't notice. She'd kept that part, and in the end, that was the only part that mattered. Hey, before you go, I just want to take a moment. If anything in this story felt off to you, a moment that didn't quite land right, a line that felt a little too tidy, a scene that moved too fast or too slow, that's on me. Storytelling is imperfect work. Even when you care about it, even when you try to get it right, something always slips through that you wish you'd caught. This story was built for women who know what real weight feels like. Women who have sat in rooms alone with something hard and found a way to keep going anyway. If I did that justice, even partially, then I'm grateful. If I fell short somewhere, I hope you'll forgive me. Aaliyah's story isn't about revenge. It isn't about being proven right. It's about what it costs to survive something quietly, without applause, without anyone watching, and how some women do that every single day. I tried to honor that. I hope it showed. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling it with us.